Welcome to the Zencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the Managing Director of B Squared, and I'm the host of the podcast called the Zencast. Each week we'll be talking about a different topic within the world of SEND to improve our knowledge, to provide support to professionals working in schools, and to empower parents. In this episode, we're discussing starting an alternative provision. My guest this week is Veena Virahsammy, the CEO of Oxford Creators, an alternative provision and so much more in Oxford. Veena started the alternative provision due to her son being unlawfully excluded from school and wanted a provision to be a positive place for students. The Zencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. Hopefully you know that by now. And we help schools to show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we can help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. We have frameworks for students from birth all the way through to 25. And at that top end, we have our Steps for Life framework that assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And for the most complex learners working within the engagement model, our engagement steps can build a profile of the student's need and show the progress they are making. Visit the B Squared website or click on a meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing starting an alternative provision. My guest this week is Veena Virahsammy, the CEO of Oxford Creators, an alternative provision and so much more in Oxford. And Veena started the AP due to her son being unlawfully excluded from school and wanted a provision to be a positive place for students. Veena is also a content creator on TikTok. And I think her account was the first account I followed when I joined TikTok early this year, and then bumped into Veena the very next day at the Autism Show. Welcome to the show, Veena.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. So excited. I love doing podcasts. So thanks for inviting me on.
You used to have your own podcast, didn't you?
I did back in the day, and then I got too busy with running an alternative provision.
So you started an alternative provision 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Initially to support your son, but you now support more students. But before we get into how you start an alternative provision, or why you would even think about doing that, what is an alternative provision?
An alternative provision is somewhere where children go who don't attend school at all. So they still might be on roll with their school, but they're not physically going into the classroom, or it's for children that are at risk of exclusion. So we have a real mix of students who have maybe been already permanently excluded from a school. Then they come to us and they still might be on a reduced timetable at school. So maybe going in 3 days a week to their school and then 2 days a week with us. So we've got a real kind of mixed bag of who comes to us at the moment.
An alternative provision is more than just daycare.
Oh my, yes. Yes, Dale. It's more than just daycare.
I just want to state the obvious. Sometimes you can say going, let's just start the obvious. It's not just daycare.
It's not just daycare. And this is why I love to raise awareness about alternative provision, because it can look very fluffy from the outside. It can look like, oh, you're just talking to the child, or taking them out for a walk, you're taking them to the gym. It can kind of from the outside look like a really magical, where kids do nothing really, in all honesty.
Just having fun.
They're just having fun, but we do a lot more deeper work than that. And I think for all the teachers listening as well, I think they'll appreciate it does take a lot of hard work and time to build relationships with those children. And for a lot of our students, they've already been very let down by the education system as a whole. So a lot of them do have the barriers with us. And, we might see that challenging behaviour from day one. And for us as well, it's putting all those kids together in the same place. So you've got all these different family backgrounds, all these different situations that have happened at schools. And I think we've got 30 kids starting back in September for this academic year. And I think we've got 28 different schools. So it's a real, challenge to mix all of that as well together.
So to me, when I think of an alternative provision, to me, it's literally about almost secret teaching. Because almost like they've come out of school, hate that, and you're teaching them, but you can't look like a school. In my head,
Yeah.
that's what an alternative provision is. I know there are ones which may be on a farm and things like
Yes.
that. It's getting that engagement, getting that interest, maybe doing maths in a way they have no idea they're doing maths.
Yeah.
It's hiding it.
Yeah. And even learning skills. I think the biggest skill we can learn in life is communication. So we do podcasting and content creation, and it's done in such a fun way. Like we'll go to the local fire station, interview the fireman. But before we get to the fire station, they've had to prep the questions, which is English. So you're then, they're putting all the questions out there. They then have to analyze what would be a good question. Then they're doing the interview, and I make them practice so much before we go anywhere. So they're kind of self-analyzing what they're doing as well. So I'll ask them the questions, how can we make this interview the best? Or what can I do to make you feel more confident when we're going there? So you're actually learning so much before we even do the podcast interview. So I really, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's great.
Well, I think it is. There's a much more. There's a purpose. So in school, we are learning about Henry VIII. Why? Because it's just in the national curriculum.
Yeah.
The purpose isn't always there. Whereas I think in the alternative provision, there is a purpose to why you're doing the English, because we're doing this interview. Why are we doing this? Because we're doing it's leading to something which they're going to do.
And everything we do, it's either going to improve their current situation, it's going to be maybe looking at loops of thoughts or behaviour from their past life before they came to us, or it's giving them skills that they can use in a job.
Yeah.
So it's there's always a purpose behind. So if we do take the children for walks sometimes, but that's because they might have had a meltdown the day before, and we really want to have that one-to-one time with them and understand, did something happen at home yesterday, or has a family member or friend come back in your life recently and that's triggered them? So again, there's always a reason behind why we do an activity, but I do appreciate it can look fluffy. What did you say? I took them for a walk.
But I think it is, you mentioned communication, and if you think of the four broad areas of need, as I've learned more about them, and the communication interaction and the SEMH is probably the thing that you're focusing on the most.
Yeah.
Because you said you're kind of trying to break down those barriers, trying to build their confidence, maybe give them, when things happen, an alternative way of dealing with it. It's all those areas. The English and maths is maybe a byproduct.
It is,
Work on that communication in SEMH, because the aim of an alternative provision is to get them back into school.
It is. I paused there because that's supposed to be, Dale, the ultimate aim. But we've got a student going into year 11, and he has now this will be 2 years. So I think before alternative provision was supposed to be for that intervention, it's a targeted 6 to 8 weeks or maybe a full term, and you go back into your school. But what we've seen, and I don't know the full picture of the whole country, but what's happening in our county is that some of them, yes, they do still come for maybe 2 terms, but then they go to a specialist school after, or they're going to a different mainstream school. I don't think, and again, we're still pretty new, we're going up to our 2nd birthday, I don't think any of our kids have gone back to their school full time.
That's disappointing. I remember with the whole Send an AP improvement plan, as I was reading about it, there's a whole thing about kind of off-rolling or kicking them out to the alternative provision and things like that. And when I think when I initially read about it, it was like, oh, if you don't fit in mainstream, we'll stick them in an AP. And it kind of went almost like if they don't fit in the mold, out of the school. And I kind of related it initially that it's almost like saying the schools don't have to change if this child doesn't fit. And that's how I read it. But as I read it more, and it was like, no, they've got to go back. The aim is, and it should be, is they come out, you kind of resolve some of the challenges, issues. And when I say challenges and issues, I'm not necessarily saying they're with the child. It's often inferred it's the child's fault. But the challenge is maybe how to deal with situations and things like that. But to me, the aim should be they should go back to their school. And it might be the school has to change.
And make those adaptations, and it's for us to give the recommendations. But and again, maybe if I talk to you in 2 years' time, maybe it would have changed. But at the moment, it seems that the education system is desperate to put these children somewhere. So if we've had a lot of kids who've had that breakdown already, and that school may have already tried every single thing possible to have that child there, even on a reduced timetable, and that's not working, that's when they look at alternative provision and say, this child now, he or she is with you for the whole of year 11. They're not coming back. So there's lots going on. You can't see this, guys, but Dale just looked at me very concerningly there.
To me, it was like they're coming to you, but almost like, but they should be with you within the least amount of time. And in reality, it's probably your job to say, yeah, actually, we've got about 6 months work here, or we've only got 3 months work, and then they should be ready. Not being told they're with you for a year. That doesn't make sense to me.
And remember, the majority of alternative provisions, so we're not registered with Ofsted. So we are classed as an unregistered provision, but we have our own kind of audits we have to do in the county that I'm in. And remember that we're not set up like a school. We don't have the same resources. We don't have the same you've got so much experience there as well. So when I set the alternative provision up, that's probably been one of my biggest shocks to this, working in this industry, is like, oh, hold on, we're actually acting like a special school for this child now. Like, how have we got to this point?
Yeah.
It's,
Interesting. So you've got 30 children, 28 schools, was that?
About 28 at the moment, yeah.
How much communication do you have with those schools? Or is it a case of, here's a child, goodbye?
Do you want the honest answer?
I want the honest answer because...
Or do you want me to do a bit of a fluff?
Because I think the honest answer is none of them, which it really shows me that they come to you as we're getting rid of them, not as in this is a temporary measure and what do we need to do to get them back in? How can that sounds like that's not happening.
So I would like to praise some of the schools, because some of the schools are on it. They're like, this is the child we want you to help. This is the plan. We would like to try and reintegrate them, but we know this may not be the end goal. This is what we would like you to do. This is the child. And they tell me down to the T, the child's needs, what support they need, about their family background. I'm like, brilliant. Because
that is great.
We get so excited in the office when that happens. We're like, this is a brilliant school. And then on the other end, we do have some schools that are just like, they don't even fill in the referral form properly. It'll just be their name. Everything else is left blank. So what we've done as an alternative provision, we are always constantly adapting and changing, because I want us to be the number one provision in the county that we're in. So we're always striving to be better. So what we've done now in our referral forms is you can't go to the next question until you've answered what are the triggers, what's the support, have you included their EHCP and risk assessments. So we're making sure that we're keeping the schools accountable.
I had an idea which I'll say for after the podcast because it might be a bit blunt.
Are you sure you can't say it, Dale?
Well, you could just have a tick box at the bottom of the form of, we've let the child down, we don't know.
Okay. Well,
so it's almost like, instead of saying skip the question, it's basically saying skip the question, but you have to literally say,
you have to give
we've let the child down, we don't know the answer.
And take accountability.
That's the thing, that's what you're saying, is we don't know. It's like, well, but that's maybe a bit blunt.
Maybe. And also, the person that's filling in that form, they might have, in most cases, they're probably being the one that are the advocate for that child. So maybe the school as a whole, or the education system as a whole, has let that kid down, but maybe the person referring hasn't. But I like your idea.
Because if we come back to all behaviour is a form of communication, all behaviour is due to an unmet need. Generally children like to please everyone. We know that. Unless there's trauma involved, things like that. And for most children, it's an unmet need. Is kind of, this is happening. So ultimately, what I think, again, with the alternative provision should be short term until, and working out the best, as you said, which is quite nice, is this is what we're hoping, but it might not be the end goal. That's what we think. That was a great thing, because it is, the aim is to get them back into that school. But part of that journey, you might realise actually there is more going on here, and actually that might not be the best fit.
And actually as well, it's for everyone to recognise that that child is not getting the best care, potentially an alternative provision, because they might need a specialist teacher. They might need all these other things that the alternative provision can't provide. But again, what this has made me think is like, oh my goodness me, I am maybe going to have to hire different kinds of people now with different skills so we can provide that. But really, alternative provision, we shouldn't be doing that.
No.
We have really, over these last few months, been turning into a special school for some of these children, which again, is that right for the child?
Because in my head, you're talking about it kind of AP being fluffy. And in kind of my head, that is kind of that SEMH, that communicate, it is going to be a fluffy thing. But then you might have children coming to you, neurodiverse, who need that routine and rigidity.
Yeah.
And in my head, that's not an AP, because what does everyone want to do today?
So maybe we do things a bit differently then. So what we do try and do is we do try and have a routine and structure. So all our mentors, we plan lessons probably like a teacher does. But obviously things happen and we have to adapt the plan. But there's always some kind of plan in place. So we do get most of our children in that routine of like, right, we're going to do boxing first. Then we're going to work on deep breathing techniques or how we can better manage anger. So I think that's important for the child to know what's coming up as well. So they know. And actually, again, we learn so much from our students. Sometimes we haven't told the child what we're doing and we've realised that can cause some anxiety or they become heightened. And a lot of our kids will come in, what are we doing today? So they actually want to know what they want to do. And I think that's the worst thing for us to be like, we don't know. What do you guys, what do you want to do? So I think it's important to have a plan, but we're very aware that that plan can change because again, they might have come in and something's happened at home. They might have had a really bad morning and they want to talk to their mentor about, how they spoke to their parent and maybe they didn't mean it and what can they do differently next time. So it's just adapting, I think, our sessions for their presenting need at that time as well.
Because I went up to an alternative provision up in the Lake District, which was literally a farm. And I'm literally, where is this? I know it's just kind of, I didn't realise it is literally a couple of porta cabins in a barn.
Oh, see, I love that.
But they were doing mechanics, they're doing farm stuff, and it was very much like this. They had that assessment doing it all, but it was very much as the kids came in, it was kind of getting that mood to work out what to do. But
oh, okay.
So it was,
and I think it is different because I know of other alternative provisions that do that. This is the theme of our alternative provision, like working with horses or being on a farm. And then maybe they will have, I don't want to talk on behalf of other alternative provision, how they do things, but maybe they have set different things, but then it's more the child, so it's child-led, isn't it?
It's more like, well, the horses need this happening each day and you can kind of maybe pick and choose bits. So you can't, and then there'll be, but it's still all about learning because the whole time you're doing those activities, there is communication going on, you're building those relationships and you're learning about the student.
And the power of being outside. As adults, what are we told all the time? You're working in an office, 9 to 5, or in a school 9 to 5, or 9 till 9, most of our cases, and it's get out, go for a walk. So we got
have
to
a
teach.
Walking meeting.
Yeah, have a walk. Oh, yeah, I haven't done that yet.
I haven't done a walking podcast yet.
Oh, we should have done that.
I'll be there. As you fall over.
Run away from a bee. I think it's really important to say to children that it's also important, being outside. That's powerful in itself, isn't it? And also, sorry, I want to circle back a bit here as well. In terms of alternative provision, we don't fit all students. So if a student was very outdoorsy, we don't do much outdoor alternative provision. We've got partnerships in place because we live in a very countryside area. But as a provision as a whole, we're not the leader in outdoor education. So if a child's being placed with us that wants to work with horses, we're not the right provision for them. So we have to say at that referral point, like, we could meet the need of this child and help maybe them going to the gym and employability skills, but are we really the best suited provision right now for this child if they have been out of school for 2 years and they haven't left the house? Are we the best bet then? I don't think we are. So it's about everyone, again, working together. And actually, even I will say this to other alternative provisions, you shouldn't be taking on children if their interest isn't in whatever your offer is. Because I have also seen that where students will go to a specific provision. And I'm like, I don't think that's going to work. And 3 months down the line, they've been kicked out. And that's another rejection, another isolation for that child. And they're feeding into that cycle. That's not fair.
No.
On that kid.
No. So that kind of brings me into, because you obviously started an alternative provision. You were bored one day and thought,
I was so bored.
You know what?
I thought, let me change my whole life career.
So what was your career before?
So I've got a background actually in media. So back in the day, I was a radio presenter. And then I had my son unexpectedly when I was 21.
I always love it when an adult says, I unexpectedly had a child. It's like, are you sure you didn't do something 9 months earlier? It might have...
Can't remember that. Can't remember that.
It's like, I accidentally had it. It's like, sorry, it's always that phrase.
It was very challenging at the time, but best thing that's happened in my life, having my son. But I did not realise that having my child would then lead me down this whole other path in life. Being a single mum as well from the day he was born, I couldn't work in the media anymore because it was long hours. You can get called to go to events, go to nightclubs, do all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a mum now. I can't really leave my newborn baby. So I kind of stepped away from the media and I had to create something. So I think whilst I was trying to figure out what I wanted to create, I got a job as a receptionist. So just working it was a really nice, actually, kind of international headhunting company. So I learned a lot from there. But I think maybe some of your listeners may relate to this feeling of when you're in a job and you're thinking, why am I here? There is more to life than doing whatever X, Y, and Z that job is. So I kind of just left. Single mum and all, just let me just leave. But that's when I fell into marketing and I was helping small businesses set up YouTube channels and get confident on camera. And yeah, from that, that's what I did for a good while.
And then your son got excluded.
Then my son. So before my son, so I've always been very proactive. So primary school, I think he had one exclusion in 6 years. So it was fine, kind of. There was a lot of issues with his primary school. I didn't know anything about additional needs, special education. I didn't know any of that. So we kind of went through primary and it was all right. When he got into secondary, I was like, oh, what's happening here? It's getting excluded, it's getting isolations. There must be a reason for this behaviour. I then trained to be a clinical hypnotherapist. So I thought, right, I'm going to help my son and help other adults, because even for us as adults, it's always good to question why we don't put ourselves out of our comfort zone, or we don't take that job, or we don't or whatever it is. Always question why you don't or do things. So I've been really fascinated by human behaviour as well. But doing the course and qualifying as a clinical hypnotherapist and working with clients, again, I was like, oh, everything's related to our childhood. Everything. Everything.
Yes. Yes. Hand on my heart, own personal experience. Yes. 100 million times.
And I then kind of had a little, I don't want to call it a breakdown, but I was like, oh my goodness me. Because when I found out that everything affects a child from the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, and, I'll be quite honest, and I was in a very abusive relationship. So all my son was hearing in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy was shouting and probably feeling me crying and, so much was going
your heartbeat,
on.
Your blood pressure.
Exactly. So that all affects your child. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. When knowledge is power, isn't it? And so from the 3rd trimester of pregnancy until 7 years old, that's when the child is soaking up every single thing. And actually looking back, my son's going into year 11 now. That was the most traumatic period for him, was pregnancy, up until he was probably about 9, 10 actually. So imagine all of that going into him, everything that happened to him, that's all affected him. And then I was like, oh, okay, wow. I didn't probably have to do a whole course and train to figure that out, but it was really interesting. That then led me when his school one day called me up and they said, oh, your son's not returning. And this was an end of year 7 in his secondary school. I said, oh, okay, right. Are you permanently excluding him then. I was kind of prepared, like no parent wants their child to be permanently excluded, especially when you're working really hard with the school. I thought in partnership, but obviously not. For them to then say, no, we're not permanently excluding him. He just can't come back on site. Right. So what I don't understand what happened. But then I just kind of fell to the floor and cried. My son did witness this, which will also probably affect him in later in his life. This is when I went down the rabbit hole. This cannot be happening. This doesn't sound, when you have that gut, and I'm like, how can a school do this? And then I was just fighting with the school, the local authority, and all I was fighting for was for my son to have a full-time education. I wasn't even asking for him to please have him go back, because look, my son wasn't an angel. He did, disrupt probably others in the classroom, but it wasn't to that extreme extent of maybe people listening to this might have pictures of what he was doing. It was not extreme of what he was doing. It was maybe disruption in a classroom, which I, again, don't condone. If your child wants to learn, I don't want that for any child, but it's like, you've got to help these other children and figure out, why are they behaving in this way? And if someone had asked me the question, has anything been happening at home? Has anything happened in the last few years? Then maybe they would have understood. I did try and tell them, but by then it was too late.
But I think if on Finton, you'll talk about that persistent disruptive behaviour. And it is that you might have a child who does something extremely bad, instant permanent exclusion. Yeah. But you have these children who kind of get internally excluded, it's that persistent disruptive behaviour.
Yeah.
And it is an unmet need. It's kind of saying, this isn't right for me, or I'm struggling, or something's not right. And it's kind of giving them some control that if this happens, whatever it is, but it kind of goes on. And rather than changing how you respond to it, you keep going down the same path. And when you get to a certain amount of time.
Yeah, I call it the cycle of exclusion.
Yes.
Because if you do not break it, that child will continuously get excluded. And I'm sure schools don't want their exclusion figures to go up. They don't want these children to keep disrupting the whole school. I know there's teachers and head teachers that want to help these children. So I really think we all need to kind of get together and be more supportive of these kids and figure out, why are they behaving in this way? Because I'm telling you now, once you've excluded that child, and I've done a lot of research into this by talking to our kids, majority of them have had many, many exclusions when they get to us. And I say, does exclusion help you? They said, no, I just sit at home and do nothing, go back in. Does anything change? No. So how is this beneficial for the child, but also for the school?
So I always have this, one of my favourite quotes, Albert Einstein. Do you know this one? The definition of insanity.
Oh, yes, I know this one.
Is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Yet we're still doing it.
My question is, why?
Because no one's written a nice little script on how to fix it another way.
So my question, follow-up question for this is, why can't there be some schools that do things differently? And maybe there are, and I would love to hear from them, because I want to create partnerships and learn so we can spread this message of, what are those schools doing that don't exclude the child? What have they got that other schools don't? Dale is smiling a lot here.
It's a long answer. But it basically comes down to the phrase, it's the way we've always done it, and other phrases which are basically kind of highlighting why we do it this way is because there's a rule set. There's a process to follow. It's safe. If I follow this process, I can't get in trouble because I'm following a process. So if you give me another process which will fix it, I will follow that process. But there isn't a nice set of rules on how to resolve this issue. There isn't a nice process to follow. It's not like you've broken your arm, we think. So let's x-ray it. Let's put it in a plaster cast. We know it takes 6 months, so we'll check it off. That's a nice, simple process. But if I told you there was a different way, which might work, you're going to no, we know this works.
So
the definition works is a different, but I think with that exclusion, there is a process which allows the other children to learn, continue learning.
But haven't we got to that stage now where we have all realised that that doesn't...
But we haven't got an alternative process.
But whose job is this then?
Well, there isn't an alternative process because we like simplicity. We've learnt this as a society. We like very simple
Well,
things.
we're going to have to do a new process then. But my question...
it can be maximum like 5 steps.
But does this come from... My question is, look, I haven't got any teaching background, so I don't know if this is possible. Why can't there be a school... Can a school... Sorry, let me summarise this. My question to you, Dale. Can a school come up with their own exclusion policy where if they need that child to not be in that classroom, rather than excluding, they can keep the child in school and they do some kind of other steps? They have 5 other steps.
Yeah.
So a school can have that autonomy to do that. They don't...
So I might quote a stat wrong, but I think it is only 15 or so % of schools have an issues around exclusions. So there are lots of schools who don't exclude any pupils. So Finton has there's a podcast I did around exclusion with Finton. And so all these exclusions are happening in a very small minority of schools. So it's not like 50% or 30. It's a much smaller number that all of these exclusions are happening. There are lots of other schools where they'll sit there and recognise, yeah, I know the child did that. And there are certain ones that if a child does that, there has to be. So someone was telling me about a knife in school.
Yeah.
Whatever the intention of being nice and whatever, and the rules, if you can't have a knife in school. It's a kind of a black and white thing. Get that? So there has to be that punishment. But there is that education afterwards. Why did that happen? How did it happen? That education that happens afterwards. And there are lots of schools where they look at it and going, right. So, but there are other times like that persistent disruptive behavior that maybe your son was doing. They would sit there and go, okay, so something's not right, and they'll investigate it. So yeah, there are lots of exclusions, but if you actually count the number of schools doing it, it's not a bigger problem as you think.
Right.
But then there are schools but it's a weird thing of that all schools do this, and it's understanding how many. So I thought it was a much bigger problem. And then Finton goes, oh no, it's only actually this number of schools where this is happening.
Maybe it's all in our county then, because, because, so all of our students, they come again from different schools, but they've all been excluded multiple times. So that's interesting.
So there is a podcast I did with Katrina Lowry from Neuroteachers around behaviour. It was her journey, and that's a really interesting one where she went in and was told this behaviourism thing, and you have to do this, you have to be.
Yeah.
And she learnt it didn't work, but it took her a number of years. But she only learned it didn't work when she was open to another way of doing things.
Yes. Yeah.
And to be open to it, you kind of have to understand that maybe the current isn't working. But if you're surrounded by a bubble, everyone believes this is the only way. It's hard to have. I'm just clear, I'm not bashing anyone. I'm trying not to bash. It's just some schools kind of fall into this, and generally it's always senior leaders. It's never the individual teachers. It's the ethos of the school. There's whole loads of things, and you can go into why this, why that. Do you do the big things or the little things? It's a whole mess.
And so much of it as well. I genuinely believe there's lots of teachers out there in the schools that do want to change things, but then they feel maybe stuck. And I don't want to put thoughts and words into other people's mouths, but they might feel stuck because they're in this bubble, and maybe they want to try something. They're like, oh no, that's going to take too much time. We can't do that. Or that's a tiny bit of money. We can't do that. Or why don't we create our own in-house alternative provision, which actually a lot of schools are trying to do now. But the issue with that is they're putting the same members of staff in there, where I think you actually need different people in there running it, because then it's still like an extension of school. And some children, they're like, but this is still school. So I think, again, that needs a bigger conversation. And I actually believe that alternative provision should not exist. I think all schools should have their own AP that might be on site, or maybe it's somewhere else, but that child still feels part of that school. They still feel included in the community. They can maybe still go to sports day or whatever it is. I think we're segregating too much here as well.
There is one of the things with the whole SEND and AP improvement plan, they're talking about like, almost like you're on hot standby. You have this AP sitting there.
They call us and it's like, right, we need to send
they're
them
going to come with you for 3 weeks, and you're like, cool, yeah, we'll work with them for 3 weeks. Oh, we've got another one for 6 months. And they come to you and you're like, cool. But sorry, if they're not there, how's that funded? You can't just have that
you can't,
potential, we can take 20 kids next week. So what have you been doing for the last 2 weeks if you've got all that? There's a whole capacity thing in my head, which makes me think being in a school makes more sense because you can use them in other ways at different times. And you can also make that integration closer. So perhaps they might spend the mornings in school, afternoon in the AP, because it is just literally crossing the car park or something.
And actually, sorry, before I forget this, I really want to put this out there because, again, working with these children, I think the misconception is that the people think that these kids don't want to learn, they don't like education, they don't want to be in school. Whereas we've just had a boy who was on roll with his mainstream. He didn't go in for 2 years. He came to us. He's been with us on, I think it's been a 6-month placement. He's now going to a different mainstream school. But when he came to us, I said, what is your goal? What do you personally want to achieve? Oh God, I'm going to cry now. I feel so emotional saying this. And he said, I want to be in school. That was it. That was his goal. But no one had asked him up to that point, what do you want? And for me, that's such a simple question to ask these children.
I think assumptions are made when children are misbehaving, they do not want to be there. That is, I think, the assumption. They just want to disrupt learning for others. It's like, no, they probably want to learn. They've learned from everything around them that they need an education. They need to be in school. It's going to get them to what they want. But something somewhere isn't working or adding up or making sense to them, and no one's helped them understand it. For me, there's a big thing with, I fell out of love with my education at college. I was getting into points where I didn't see the relevance of what I was learning. My computing A-level content was like 15 years out of date. I did loads of computing, what I'm learning, and we stopped doing that like 15 years. Why are we learning this? It didn't make sense. I was doing pure maths, which is just boring maths of theoretical. It's like, why? And I just went, I can't. I don't see the point. And for some children, and I think is, why am I learning this? If I don't understand why, I'm not going to learn. There's a whole thing around, is the curriculum fit for the purpose of where we are in the world and what we're creating as a society? There's a whole thing around that if it's not really relevant, why am I learning it? I don't understand.
Yeah, and I think this is why you do see some children kind of standing up and saying, well, why am I in this classroom? If they already know they want to be a bricklayer or an accountant or whatever it is, they need to know that. It's what we talked about before, isn't it? It's like, what's the purpose of this work we're doing? So again, it's the whole educational reform, isn't it? What are we teaching them? Because I think maybe if we were doing more life skills in school and practical things, would those children who were labelling as disruptive and challenging, would they be challenging in that classroom? Because what I get on paper as the manager of our AP, I read through it. I'm like, right, take everything with a pinch of salt, meet the child. They do not behave like how their paperwork is because they're getting different activities. They're getting their needs met in different ways. So why can't we bring, and again, I know this will take years and years, but why can't we take some of that alternative provision essence and put it into schools?
It doesn't, that's a long, but you can do it sooner than that. So if you've got a gardener or a bricklayer, and they go, I don't need, I'm going to be a gardener. Cool. You can do turfing. Yes. So how much turf do you need to cover this garden? It's a rectangle.
Building in maths already. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're going, well, it's this big this way. That's the square area. Now, how big's a piece of turf? So how many will fit into that? And you work bricklayer. Right. So you've got to build a wall this high, this long. How many bricks do you need? Yeah. You're going to run a business. Yeah. I want to run my own business. Cool. So what's the profit? How are you going to work? And you help them see
And they're already seeing that vision and visual in their mind then of, oh, this is the point.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It doesn't have to be that hugely, it's that, why am I doing this? Because at some point you're going to have this. At some point you're going to get this situation. At some point you're going to be going here and you're going to have to work. It's just a bit more in the real life. Why and when do you use these things?
Yeah.
And that's not a huge change.
No.
It's just maybe going, right, so we're going to lesson on this. You're all confused? Yeah. Let's watch a quick video of someone using it in the real world. Then you watch someone playing football. So where's the maths? And you sit there and point out. I always just think kind of maths, there was no maths in football. And then you watch David Beckham do a perfect pass to someone running. And he's looked up and he's worked out that velocity, worked out the distance, worked out the angle, not only of the kick left to right, but the up down, and the energy required to hit that ball, to get it to the exact point. That is very impressive maths.
It is. Yeah.
Very impressive maths that David can just do.
And that will instantly engage a lot of these children who love sport, who love football, who again, that's that practical learning actually, then bringing it into the classroom.
And you can literally sit there and if you want, we can do the maths that he's running at this speed. So he'll be at this point and that you can do it all in maths. It'll take you maybe 20 minutes to work it all out. But David just looked, asked probably David to do it, and I am assuming, do that same maths in a more academic way. He'll look at you and go, I'll never use this in my life. And it's like every time you kick the ball, you're doing this.
That's what you're doing.
And it is that seeing when my daughter said the horrible thing of, why am I doing maths? I don't need it. Every time I used maths that weekend, I pointed out to her. I think halfway through the Saturday, she was like, I get it.
I love that. It's like bore them with saying the same thing over and over again.
Yes.
Make your point.
So what time are we leaving? Well, it's 10 miles away and we're going to drive at 30 miles an hour. And you just see it looking at you going, God. And it was just, and she got it. She went, okay, I get it. But sometimes we do things in a hidden way.
Yeah.
And my favourite thing is
the best way when it's hidden.
My daughter went out with her friends to go for a Costa. And they ordered their drinks and they paid. And the last girl just took her drink and they're like, you got to pay. And she went, what do you mean pay? You've got to pay. She's like, what do you mean pay? And she'd never seen her mum pay because she just taps with her card. So she thought she was just collecting Costa points. She just thought she walked into Costa Coffee and asked for a coffee, got some points and walked off. And this was somebody who is in year 9, doing well at school, but that perception. So sometimes we do need to be more explicit in what we're doing and why we're doing it for them to understand that why maths is important when we use English.
Yeah.
That everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
And lots of things. And the importance of saying sorry. And actually, sorry isn't really admitting blame. That's what I think a lot of kids, if you say sorry, you're saying I've done it. It was my fault.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, sorry is, that wasn't my intention. And if it did do this, I didn't mean it.
I think it's powerful, isn't it, having that accountability? And I think it's, look, at the end of the day, we all have an ego. Even if someone says, I don't know, we all do. Some of them are small. Some people have big egos. But it's putting your ego aside as someone that works in education. If you realise you have done something like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I could have handled that situation with that student in a different way. I'll tell you a personal story here. So at the alternative provision, obviously my son is one of our students. And that's probably my biggest challenge. There's many challenges of running an alternative provision, but the biggest one is when your own child comes, and we're not a school as well. So it's not like I don't see him. He's there with me. So we come in together, he's there. He finds it very difficult to distinguish between mum and head of an AP. That's hard for him to do that. But then I dropped the ball once when we were in the class and he was with another student and I said, get down. And I never shout at any student. But because it was my son, I was like, get down from that sofa. Bless him, he wasn't really he was just taking a photo. He wasn't doing anything, But there was another student in there at that time. And I was like, oh no. And she was like, oh, Veena, why do you shout like that? It's like I'm your daughter. And I took her aside in a one-to-one and I say, I'm really sorry for doing that. And some of the kids don't know my son is actually my son there because I don't go around telling them. But she knew. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I did kind of have my mum hat on there and that was all directed at my son. I'm sorry if that made you feel, a certain way. She was like, oh, it's okay, Veen. Because we've got that strong relationship I've built with this other student. But it is important to apologise because I was sorry for raising my voice at her. And I didn't need to do that, but I slipped up in that moment. But I think that teaches the children as well that we're all human.
Yes.
We all make mistakes and it's okay. If you can admit your mistakes and be accountable, that is a powerful lesson for children to learn. We can't be perfect all the time.
So we've been talking for about 45 minutes and we haven't even got on to you for starting an alternative provision, which was the name of the podcast. Minor thing there. So you've got all your backstory.
Me and Dale's went on a completely different tangent. You're going to have to call this something else.
It's what we do. It's what we do. So we've got the why you started. You got into that. You obviously, you said your career wasn't at all in education.
No.
But you just went, let's start an AP to support my child.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there was a very, very, very steep learning curve with that.
Yes, because I've got none of this experience in the education system. So even for me learning acronyms like SLT and even the name of our council, like teachers were calling it something different. And I thought, oh my goodness me, like what SLA? All of these things I didn't know. But with me, I'm so determined with what I do because I've got that purpose of why I'm doing it. I'm learning. Even now, we're coming up to our second birthday and I'm just learning every single day. And I'm not afraid to ask questions. So I will, if a teacher does say something and I don't understand, I'm like, oh, could you just clarify that for me? Or what do you mean by that? Or sometimes if there's a big meeting going on and I'm like, okay, I'm going to steer everyone off here by asking, I'll just go home and Google. I just do so much research every day, but I think my biggest learning curve is doing it. So I think you can do as much research as you like about alternative provision, but you've got to start somewhere. And that can be starting very small. So how I started, it was 2 students and me and another mentor, 4 of us in a tiny, tiny little room. We didn't have anything, no computer. I couldn't afford it. No furniture. Nothing. I don't know why these schools place them with us, but but I think my message as well to people is if you're thinking about doing something and whether you're in a school as well and you want to try a different strategy with a child, try it. Be brave and have that self-belief and confidence to go for it and get out your comfort zone. Because I think so much of us in life, we talk about what we want to do, but then we don't take action. I get messages every day on my social media. Plug at Mum to Millionaire on Twitter and Instagram. I don't really use Twitter. Instagram and TikTok. Sorry, TikTok is where me and Dale met, isn't it?
She is on Twitter though.
I am. I don't really use it though.
I did the full research earlier, as you know. I did the full research. I've seen the videos.
Oh yeah, the education system. But I get messages every day from head teachers, from teachers, from TAs, asking me how I've started the alternative provision. And I've got a whole ebook that's available on my website that I've put all my steps. I think there's 12 steps I took to starting the AP. But the thing is, you need to start it yourself. That is where the most learning comes from. So you can do as much research as you want on whatever area it is you want to get into, but you've got to take that first step. Because if you don't, whatever you want to do in life is always going to be that dream. So I know there's lots of people out there that want to start APs, but they're not going to do it because it's that fear. And again, it's what I said right at the beginning of this podcast, it's question yourself. Why aren't you taking that step?
So from my point of view, one thing I would say is, and you've touched on this before, is what is your identity of your AP? So as you said, are we a foresty, outdoory thing? Are we a this thing? Are we, because you're quite media, you're content creator. So what is your identity? Understand it, know it, believe it, live it. And don't tweak to try and fit someone else in, because if
and
it
that's
doesn't
very
work,
difficult. Yeah.
is you've got to know this is us, this is our offering. Is it going to be fit? And there is something you shouldn't be afraid of saying that's not a good fit for us. That won't work, because as you said, them coming to you, it not working and going away does actually more damage, or can do more damage, because it's another rejection. So that is one thing, is have that. What is our identity? What are our strengths? What do we offer? How are we going to do it? But also, if you look at the Oxford Creators, it's not just about the education. You are more or less running a business. There is income, there is expenditure, there is marketing, there is everything. And I think all your previous experiences help you probably a lot more than you realize.
I think it does, yeah. And I made that kind of decision right from the beginning for us to be like a forward-facing, transparent alternative provision that is we are very visual. So we do TikToks and Instagrams, and we I know we can actually do lots more. That's in the plan, but it's quite difficult to do everything. But for me, that's really important, actually, is that marketing piece. Because again, yeah, well, my experience before, you could have the best alternative provision, the best school. If you're not marketing it, how is anyone going to know?
Because it's not a case of, oh, here's a school, you're on the admissions list. Oh, there's a school, I'll apply, I'll get in. You are literally, you have to be known for people to refer to you. And you have to have that relationship with the council and go. So there's a lot there about raising your profile so you are noticed, and there's loads of things around that which schools don't typically have to do.
No, that's probably the biggest difference, I think, is that we have to do heavy marketing. And marketing isn't just about getting on a camera and making a video. Marketing is going into the schools and talking to, actually, what does this school need? So I'm very a curious person. So I always ask teachers, Senkos, head teachers, what do your students need? What would you, so I'll give everyone a tip here. Again, whatever anyone wants to start in life, you've got to do your research. So before I started Oxford Creators, the alternative provision, I contacted schools and I had meetings with schools and I said, this is my idea for this county. This is what I want to do. And I asked every teacher, what would be your ideal alternative provision? Don't tell me about cost. Don't tell me about, the constraints. Like, we can all be limited by our own thinking sometimes. So I said to them, give me your ideal alternative provision. So that's how I got some of the ideas for what we're doing now. When teachers would say, this is what I want. And then I would say, what's the gap in this county at the moment? What are other alternative provisions not offering? And some of them would say academic learning. So we've got we're quite privileged in the area that we're in, that there are a lot of alternative provisions, but not many of them do the academic. So what we've been trialling going into this year is now we're starting to do GCSEs with a very small number of students to test it out. So it is like you said, we've got to run it like a business. You've got to be the market leader in something. You've got to spot where the gaps are.
You've got to meet the needs, but know who you are. So you're not trying to get everyone.
Yeah.
This is what we fit. This is our niche. This is where we fit, and do that well and make sure everyone knows who you are and where you are. And I know you mentioned some or APs kind of don't last that long.
Yeah. So again, I've received messages from other alternative provisions from across the country that have basically been saying to me, good luck, because we had an alternative provision and it folded in year 5, or we didn't even make it to year 2. So I take all that information and I'm like, right, okay. And that was a very big learning curve at the beginning, because we're set up as a not-for-profit, a community interest company. And I thought, naively maybe, oh, everyone's going to donate their time for free. Everyone's going to donate stuff for free. It will all be great. No, I don't think I've got that much stuff on a, voluntary basis. But also, I want to be an employer that pays my staff well. I want to treat them well. I want to take them places, because I want them to feel, again, like with the students, part of a community. And we've made that, and you've mentioned this with the company you run as well, we've created that family environment for them. So they like coming into work. They enjoy it. It is challenging with the children. I can't lie. Like, it is very difficult on a daily basis, but we know we've got each other. So again, there's lots more to running on alternative provision. It's not just the kids we've got will always be my highest priority, but up there with them is all my staff. I want to make sure they feel fully supported in all areas as well.
I do think that some people maybe start alternative provisions, as you said, they're a teacher in a school and they're going, this is what we're not doing, I want to do that. And it's a great idea, but it's having all those other skills around it. And sometimes there are after school clubs or other things which are organisations where you kind of have to promote it. It's getting those other skills and other experiences, or finding people who want to, and building those partnerships.
If you're not going to do it yourself, you need to hire an incredible team in different areas. So again, before this alternative provision, I've never recruited. I've never had to manage. I've never had to lead a team. I'm learning. And again, I make mistakes, but I'm very honest with my team. And I will say, look, I want to try this with these students. It might not work. Maybe some of my team get frustrated for me because I want to try, but at least I know I've tried the idea. And then if it doesn't work, we move on. You move on quickly, you let go, and you learn what you've learned, and you make the next decision better.
But you also, again, going back to the relationships, is you're teaching your staff that you can make mistakes.
Of course, yeah.
And you move on, and it's okay to make mistakes, but if we don't try, we're never really going to go anywhere.
I would rather my staff go out there and think, oh, I've got this great idea for this student, let's try it. I would rather they do that and it doesn't work than them just do the same old every session.
And I'm going to wrap it up there. We got to the topic at the end. We covered lots about alternative provisions and what they are and what they're not and the differences. Yeah. So I think we have given lots of useful advice, but there's probably more than people realise to starting an alternative provision. And we haven't even mentioned the financial side of it, which is a whole other learn. But it's not a money-making scheme. It's not a cash-rich area.
I will mention this before we wrap up. I did not pay myself a salary for a year. I really need to state this because we wouldn't have survived if I took any money out at the beginning. So again, if you do want to start your own alternative provision, you need to think about that and how you're going to get funding, especially in that first year while you're building yourself up. That's
the thing. I think there is, yeah. And if you think of how many small businesses fail within 3 years, it's those sorts of things of you often need to be either very able to sacrifice things. You need to be in a position where you can, or you need to be fortunate enough that maybe you're living in, you have your own house and your partner can support your family, and then you can do these things. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and anytime you're starting anything like, there's a lot of risk. Lots of money might go in, and it might not come out again. So yes, do go for it, but go for it open-eyed, I think is the thing.
I always take calculated risks. Yes. So take a risk, but make sure you do your calculations.
So thank you for coming on the show today. As always, I have shared my guest contact details. So you can find loads of Veena's information. So her TikTok, which is Mum to Millionaire. And it's also, she's on Twitter with the same handle.
I'll have to go and tweet later.
There's also, you can find out about Oxford Creators, CIC and all that sort of stuff. So lots of information there as well.
Dale will also be doing a dancing TikTok on my TikTok, so make sure you go and check it out because he will do it later, everyone.
And as always, you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the podcast or on the Zencast website. Thank you for listening to the show. If you're listening through a platform that allows you to review the product or give it a rating, please leave a little review or give it a 5-star rating and let other people know what you think. And if you want to get in touch, let us know your thoughts, suggest topics or anything else, please message us on social media or send an email to hello@thezencast.com. And the Zencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared, and we help show the small steps of progress pupils with SEND make. And we help schools to show progress for a wide range of abilities and ages. And we have a range of frameworks that students from birth all the way through 20 to 25 with our Steps for Life framework that assesses functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills. And for the more complex learners working within the engagement model, our engagement steps can help build a profile of the student's needs and show the progress they are making, however small. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Zencast. It is goodbye from me.
Oh, and goodbye from me.
Bye.